Hi, our focus Asana today is downward dog, commonly used in all yoga classes. Downward dog is far more complicated than we think it is. Generally what happens is we'll be in like a high plank position, type of a position like this. The cue will be given to go into downward dog and we'll just pop our butt up into the air like that. Okay? Not necessarily a bad thing. That's fine if that's where you're at and that's what you want. That's fine. Yoga meets you where you're at. But really what we want is we want an entire opening throughout the entire back length of our body. Our arms and our core are working. Okay, our shoulders are working as well. Okay, and then we're stretching everything else. So we want a continuous flow up and down from the fingertips all the way down through the heels. Okay, we also want to be safe, so let's start with our base, which is your hands and your arms and your shoulders, not your legs and feet, not at all. Okay, so to be safe, we want to lay the palm of our hand down, and then we just roll it down like that. So on the mat, it looks like that. Next, I get to the pads of my fingers, and I just grip the mat. It creates a suction cup feel right there. Okay. From there, we want to engage our shoulders. Most often what happens is we crunch our shoulders up like this in that position. We don't want to do that. We want to rotate them back. You want to retract your shoulders and engage them. You should have your core engaged when you're in this position. Your serratus, all of this needs to be engaged, especially across the shoulder girdle and the serratus. You need to have those engaged so you're not all crunched up like this. It should give you a feeling of floating almost. You're pushing away, not digging into the ground, you're pushing away. It's kind of a floating feeling. So you're here. Next, I want to pay attention to where my back is at. Is my back crunched like this, or is it nice and open like this? It's not necessarily flat, but it needs to be open in my lower back. To get that effect, you can do it several ways. One way is just to press back into the extended child's pose. Get the opening you need in your lower back, keeping your arms extended out. Get your entire torso in alignment, and then open up. So instead of having my back crunched in like that, it's nice and open. I have a line of energy running from my fingertips all the way to my heel. When I breathe in, I'm inhaling through my fingertips and exhaling up my spine and down. So actually when I inhale, I feel my breath moving from here all the way up my back, and then I exhale out, down along, and out the heels. Again, I'm not crunching in like that. I'm right here. I'm retracting my shoulders and pressing. So that I'm not digging into the earth. I'm pressing back. Now, you will notice that my heels do not touch the ground in downward dog. No worries. No need for your heels to touch the ground in downward dog. That's really not what you're going for. Now, if it's a really big deal to you, then you need to work for that lower back opening, and that will help you out with that. So some other tips for downward dog. One thing that I see people struggle with a lot is they struggle with where should their downward dog be. Okay. They struggle with where it should be. So if you're trying to figure out where your downward dog should be, just in general, go ahead and go into a high plank. It should be a full high plank. I'm engaging my entire core and my legs. I'm completely engaged here, pressing away. Again, I'm not crunching in. I'm pressing away. My shoulder blades are apart. Okay, I'm pressing through my heels. And I'm going to drop my chin, roll back. This is approximately where my downward dog should be. Now, depending on where I'm going next, what my next yoga movement is, I might shorten it up. I rarely ever lengthen out my downward dog. My body is well proportioned, which means everything's a little bit shorter. Okay, and so I don't really have long legs, so for me to lengthen out my downward dog takes me more into a funky plank position. So I rarely do that, but I will shorten up depending on what I'm doing. So keep in mind that depending on your movement, you may need to shorten or lengthen out your downward dog. One other tip. Again, we often think about our legs and our feet and our heels. What we usually think about is getting our heels to the ground. Not necessary. However, I want you to pay attention to your back, okay? If you're rounding your back like this, or you're doing some kind of number like this, you know, we're trying to get there, but we're just like really rounding in our back. What I want you to do is bend your knees, lengthen out your back first, okay? Get the shoulder girdle involved, lengthen out, and then try to open up a little bit. If opening up and lengthening out your legs, so straightening out your knees, is causing that round in your back, keep your knees bent. Don't completely lengthen them out. It is perfectly acceptable to have your knees bent in downward dog. Completely acceptable. So there's some tips and some instructions, some basic instructions for you to get into downward dog and to enjoy that pose, to get the full benefit of the lengthening and the stretching of the hips and the legs and into the feet, and getting the strengthening of the arms, the shoulders, and the core. Namaste.